thank you for the introduction. Or, I have to introduce myself, I guess. But great to give a talk here. It's a little bit awkward always standing in your office and talking to a crowd you can't see, but I'll try my best. So my name is Timo Hartmann. I'm professor at the Technical University in Berlin, where I chair the Civil Systems Engineering Group. We do, let's say, conceptual work at the university. We try not to program or hack too much other than a couple of prototypes. But that's why some years ago I decided to start a company that is called Contecht. And so we are here in Berlin. And basically that's where we try to do the software programming and the professional web application programming for all our ideas that we develop at the university. My history with this group is, I think, goes back 2 years ago. We were hosting the hackathon here in Berlin, and it was a fabulous event. I think we had 300 people there, and I still think about this. And everybody was here in Berlin hacking along. And it's great that we do this online in these difficult times. And really would like to thank the organizers that they pulled this off, because it's not easy. It will not be the same as seeing each other, sitting there together, being able to have a beer once in a while. But I hope you're all gonna do the best out of the situation. I earlier was thinking whether I should already get a beer. Oh, it is 8 p.m. here, so I hope it's gonna be a lot of fun for all of you. So I was asked to give a little bit of a talk, and I don't know what to talk about usually. And you give like these scientific talks, and what do you talk about at a hackathon, right? And so I came up with this really stupid title, Hacking Cloud Exchanges, Finally BIM, with 2 question marks. And it's, I was thinking maybe I present a little bit of our journey that we went through with Contecht, and because I think significant things have significantly changed in the last years, in the last 15 years that we work in the stream. And I wanted to maybe show you that journey. And that's when you realize that you get a little bit older when you talk about the history. But I thought maybe it's interesting. Certainly looking forward to your feedback about this. And hopefully can have a lively ongoing discussion. I also joined the Slack, so you can reach me on Slack if you want to discuss more. I actually don't know if some of my employees going to join the hackathon. I should have asked them before, because I didn't. But it's all a little bit chaotic when you don't see yourself in the office every day longer, right? So let's jump in. And I actually wanted, it's like one of the things that bothers me is that we are still talking about BIM as this latest hype, right? And so I wanted to start this presentation and saying, this is actually really old stuff. So AECH, the first version came out in '87. I think Revit exists since the 2000, which is 20 years old, right? I started in the BIM world really using AECH, but also Architectural Desktop, which was like an add-on on top of Autodesk, AutoCAD normal, and you could program it, and we programmed the shit out of it back then. And then it was replaced by Revit as Autodesk BIM solution. But so it goes a long time back already. So it's really nothing new. And so hackathon is always like a great event where I think you can reflect a little bit about what happened as well, and where are we now, and what's possible, right? So the promise back then was really, this is a graphic that I always put out, and I should have translated it. Sorry for that. Slides still in German. But it's from Per Christiansson, and he's like one of the old BIM researchers, and from 2000, and he was talking about this islands of automation, right? So you heard all of this story, and we talk about the story, and everybody still complains about it, right? And it's like, everybody does their own thing in the industry, and we hardly can exchange stuff. And, and that's really, I mean, this paper was published in 2000, but probably Per was thinking about it for 10 years before he published this paper. So this is really the first type of thinking with, like, you know, which led to IFC and this whole BIM idea in the original sense. And then these BIM applications came up, right, to say, okay, we're going to have these central models that support all type of engineering, right? So just like a little impression of how old this whole thinking is. And then back then I was at Stanford, so I got my PhD at Stanford University. And then you really saw the first big, like, corporate BIM implementation things going on. Like, for example, we worked with the GSA. I don't know, for the US people probably know the GSA. The ones who are not from the US, it is really, and again, slides are not really translated yet. I don't know why. I thought I translated. Nah, never mind. Right. So the GSA is really this. They operate, maintain, and own all the public buildings in the US, and that might be, you know, not only in the US but worldwide. So they also own the embassies, but all courthouses and so forth. So a huge owner, right? And they started this BIM initiative, right? So they have 9,600 office buildings, right? You know, they said, okay, let's spend 20, like they have a budget of $20.9 billion dollars to maintain these. So let's spend a little bit of this budget and implement BIM. So we have this database that we can use, and the same models for all our buildings, right? And that helps us probably to maintain this, right? And so they started this BIM program in 2003, and they drafted one of the first BIM guides, right? One of the first corporate BIM guides. So if you want to work with us, you have to submit your stuff in this format and so forth, right? In 2007, that was also the last version. And I didn't look now, but in 2015, I looked, and they said they applied BIM on 100 projects, right? Well, great, right? 9,600 buildings. So, you know, you might wonder whether this was too early or whether this was a success, right? And then we looked a little bit, and we did some research back there. Like, this is research across 5 countries, and Stanford research with my colleagues, Zhu Gao, and my professor back then, Martin Fischer. And we looked at the thing, right? And so the common theme at this time was, we're going to have one BIM model, and that BIM model can be used by everybody, and it's central, right? And so we actually figured out around 2005, 2008, we get really intensive case studies. So I don't know, you can add up the numbers, but it's probably around 100 projects. We looked at 100 projects that use BIM, early BIM adopters, so to speak, right? And we figured out, right, that very few of them actually created the models just in time, right? So they all tried to use BIM, but they all did it for some purposes where the problem was not really ready yet, right? So either they created the models too late, and we looked, and that they should have used it really here in this angle, right? And so they used it for all of these stuff, right? And so that kind of pointed us towards, you know, we need to do something else with this, right? And then I moved to the Netherlands, and we did a big BIM survey, because we really wanted to see, is BIM, how it's like used usually, really bringing value to people. And I think this was still the biggest BIM survey that, at least that I know of, that we conducted back then. And so we used the database of Internex, and Internex in Europe is one of the major Autodesk partners, so sells Autodesk products to, you know, and they have 10,000 companies in the database that all kind of know BIM. And so we sent the survey to all 10,000, and around 1,000 answered us. So it's really a big survey when you, like, a big sample rate, or mainly Northern Europe, Netherlands, Germany, Belgium. And what we really figured out, right, so this is just the key things that, you know, we asked them, what's your BIM maturity? So how good are you in BIM? And then we also said, how is your, you know, compared with the other companies in your business, how is your performance on time, cost, and quality, right? And then we try to correlate this, right? So if, with the kind of the hypothesis was, if we have, you know, a higher BIM maturity, right, then the time, performance on time, cost, and quality of the company must be better, right? And we found very little evidence for that, right? And so back then we started thinking, right, what is actually going wrong? Starting to think again, and then other people, of course, also thought, right, and realized, again, what others also realized, that it can't be really just one unified data model, right? That probably won't work. Will also not work that models do not represent reality, right? So, like, now we're talking about the digital twins, but digital twin must always be also an abstraction, right? Then, data views cannot be meaningfully consolidated without losing the specific purpose for the data view, right? So everybody needs to see data in kind of a different way, right? Linking data is hard, right? The internet will not solve the problem with communication, right? Because data exchange is not communication. People need still to talk about it, right? So they need to have meaningful views that they can talk about. Documents will remain important, right? Yeah, we always say that, one of the hypes that we saw was the paperless construction site or something, right? But what's wrong to print, even a view from your BIM model? Nothing wrong with that, right? And then a building information authority tool cannot be the center of digital project exchange, and one model cannot guarantee full coordination information consistency, right? And so these are kind of a couple of keywords that still stick with me. And that brings me to back to this topic of this talk, which is really the BIM integrations, right? And so, like, because you remember that earlier figure with, like, the islands, and so for us the world looks much more like, it's not just like a couple of islands. It's just more like, maybe who knows Europe knows the Greek islands, right? It's like thousands of islands, and they're all, somehow you can travel with them by boat and all different means, and so some you can fly and so forth. It's really, really great to travel down there, right? But all of these kind of like intrinsically, like, and very complexly coupled, right? So for us, the world is not like you have islands of integration, like some islands of isolation that you need to integrate, but you need to be much more flexible and always look what you integrate and where, right? And so that brings us to the notion, which I always like, is like, we call it the killer app, right? And I have this little comic there, and usually people would laugh, but I don't hear you laugh, so maybe, hopefully it's a little bit funny, right? Because that brings us to really the competitive advantage that I believe is in this field, that BIM, in this old view that I just showed, never brought to us, right? Because we were not thinking about, integrations and hacking integrations, right? So what are a couple of integrations? So early hacks, couple of our early stuff that we did. One of the earliest things was, this is actually based on architectural desktop, and we really thought, okay, we need to have a better view on the life cycle of buildings, and we need to integrate basically energy simulation with the building and a life cycle database. So what materials we have in the building, what do they cost in production, and so forth, right? To really design buildings better, right? So we developed this, nowadays we would call it app, right? That integrated this. So that we developed this in 2000 or something, right? Where we said, okay, we link it to one of the biggest material databases. So we can take the quantity takeoff directly from the BIM, link it with this material database, so we know what all the materials cost in production and CO2 cost and so forth, right? But then we also link it, to an energy simulation software, right? And so we linked it also to an energy simulation software, so we would know what the building will cost on CO2, for example, during its life cycle, right? So that, for us, that's an integration. So we took a BIM model, we just used, on the fly, we pulled out the data, we linked it with other databases, we linked it with another simulation program, we developed our own interface, and that you could do the analysis, right? So that was one of the very early hacks we did, right, in that sense, right? And it worked fine. Back then, we didn't have like much browser support and so forth, right? So there's like, we had the browser components to connect to databases integrated in the architecture desktop and so forth. It was quite difficult to do, right? Here's another early hack that we did. That is one we worked at Stanford, right? So we really integrated this in an interactive meeting room. So you could have like, you know, your architectural desktop BIM model somewhere, right? But when you would change something in the BIM model, your schedule would automatically update on another screen, right? And the same would happen for your cost estimate. But even when you would change something in the schedule, your BIM model showing the 4D would also automate, so update, right? So we created this automatic updating thing for very specific purposes. Just another hack, right? Early hack that we developed, right? And so then we started thinking about, all right, so how does the ideal world in our view, right? So what's the real value proposition in our view? And that was really also the value proposition when we started Contecht. We thought there must be a market where, you know, companies or even large capital projects look for people to design them those apps, right? These custom, we would call them maybe custom integrations, right? And then, you know, help them maybe in an enterprise level to build up what we then started calling the App Store, right? So there are a lot of different, you know, purpose and applications. No matter what BIM data you use, could be Revit, IFC, some other file store. You need to link them all meaningfully, integrate them with GIS, right? But all on like very small general purpose apps. And at that time, you know, internet development was quite accessible, available already. So that's kind of the business model, the business proposition that we thought for Contecht, and that we go to the market. And so I want to focus a little bit about how that journey went in the last 12 years, right? So Who Knows Dark, the series, German Netflix series. It's fantastic. So if you don't know it, you really need to watch it, because it starts really with like, you know, this normal world, right? And then this child disappears, right? And then everybody asks, where is that kid, right? And so we were asking, what is the next killer app in that sense, right? And so we went to companies, and, you know, we started discussing with them, and, you know, and then we found somebody, our first client, right? Our first client was this company called Global, and they wanted to develop a platform for asset management, right? For public housing corporations. So corporations that manage a lot of buildings, and they probably start moving into so that company thought they're going to start moving to BIM, similar to what the GSA did, and create big BIM databases, right? And then in the end, they can, you know, collect them all and build the App Store on it, right? And so we started to develop this App Store, right? And so back then we thought we're going to use this, like, you know, general purpose BIM tools that were available. We set up on an IFC server, the TNO IFC BIM server. We did a GS integration with Cesium. This is the screenshots you see here. And we developed the first set of apps for that App Store, which is like, you know, we could develop the net living area of buildings, for example, which is very important for housing corporations, because that's drives the rental price. We developed an app that did automated quantity takeoffs to plan 3D. And so we liked the platform. Global liked the platform, but it took endless time to design it and develop it, right? And in the end, I think that project really failed simply because it was much too difficult and much too time consuming, back then at least, to develop these integrations, right? And these apps. So then that was the first thing. And so when dark continues, they don't ask where, but at a certain time when, because it's about, you know, jumping in time. We don't jump so much in time, but, you know, still, hopefully it's like a little good metaphor, right? So we start thinking when it's the first killer app, and then we continued, right? And so in what we continued, we did projects like we set up a clash detection. So a client of us wanted to have a clash detection tool where they could upload BIM models, and then they would clash automatically, and then they could really manage the clashes. And this was early stuff, right? So back then you could do the clash detection areas works, but what you really wanted to have is like kind of a web tool, right? Where the whole team can come together, right? And so we decided we're not going to do this on any of the frameworks. It was still IFC based, right? But our strategy from these early tries was really, you know, moving more towards getting away from IFC and any type of standards as quickly as possible, moving that stuff in our own database. So we started using Mongo databases back then because that was, and that already significantly reduced development times. And we did a number of projects. We developed an asset management railway system, mainly tested in Ireland, in Croatia, where we really did integrations of City GML and the Rail ML, and we had this project. We really created our own database server, which was a mixture distributed database between Neo4j, SQL, and the Mongo. We started to really think about import and data fusion performance. So we used Golang, so we could distribute it really well. And this was a significant effort, right? Probably, from the features and so forth, it was much more than our first global platform, but we developed almost half of the time, right? And then we moved on. Global came back and they wanted to have a second attempt. And so we redesigned that asset management, right? Again, we went back. We went away from the TNO server, right? It was still IFC based, but again, we just had an IFC import that we wrote in Python, and then we could pull it into our databases, right? Which was a Mongo database. We developed our own WebGL viewer, so we developed our own 3JS viewing tool, right? And so with all this, right, with all these new web technologies coming up and becoming more affordable and so forth, but also I think moving away from these big standardized frameworks that were so hard to use, right? So whoever programmed on an IFC server, right, we could significantly reduce the development time, right? So that second version we did in about 500 hours. And then the last project that we did in this range was like for a startup here in Berlin was called Metabuild. You can look them up; they're really cool. They do also energy simulation. You can model very quickly buildings. So that's the design generator, and then you get actually not only an energy simulation of this, but they do already an optimization. So they tell you which materials you should use, which windows, and so forth. They have a huge database. So really cool startup and software, and so again. We were able to develop this kind of BIM with the interface to an energy simulation optimization, right? IFC export, integration with Google Maps API in around 800 hours, right? So like in the second season of this, when we were thinking when is the BIM app, because we saw then that the BIM app will come, but the question was just when are they hitting the market? And I don't think we are quite there yet. We haven't seen many BIM apps really hitting the market with big success, other than like some BIM viewers or so forth, right? But I think we got closer, right? And then moving to season 3, which is now out on Netflix, just like 3 weeks ago. Really looking forward. So after I gave this talk, I go down and watch it with my wife. We started doing stuff with Forge, and realized that Forge again gave us a significant productivity improvement. So we started very simple, right? Like, Forge, like 360 is really difficult to transfer something from one account to the other. So we developed this transfer app, which was one of our first Forge apps. And you can look at it. It's on the App Store of Forge, right? Where you can move things. But then we got into Forge and with the Forge viewer and so forth, and we got developing. And companies actually came to us and asked us whether we can develop Forge applications for them. So one of our clients right now where we develop is AKG. AKG is the #1 software provider for infrastructure projects in Germany. So roads, rails, and so forth, right? And so we were able really quickly to develop them an integration tool 360 through Forge, right? Where you can, people can really use the design application, design the projects, and then move them to 360 and, use the great Forge viewer and so forth in 360 to visualize the stuff, right? And again, we used Golang for the import for performance reasons, right? But development time was quite short for this project, right? So we got really, really lightning fast now to do these things, right? And then we continued. We developed a 4D application that's built on Forge, right? So you can actually pull your models from 4D, link them with schedules, create movies. So, you know, it's kind of an effort to create that user interface because you need to have a scheduling app there and you need to have a time slider and so forth. But, you know, we still think that was really, really fast turnaround that we could do something like that with like really high-end graphical capability. And we developed a model checker, right? And again, you know, we do the model checks in Golang for performance reasons. We pull stuff out in our Mongo database, but the stuff is really Forge-based. So you can really develop your checking schemes, right? In our web interface that's stored on the Mongo, and then you can run it over all models that are on 360, right? And again, very little for a complex model checking app. It's very little development time, if you think about this, right? And that almost brings me to the close, because now I was talking a lot about Forge, but Forge is not the end of the world, because, you know, one of the things we are working now is, for example, integrating our model checker with Bentley's iTwin platform. So Forge is great, and Autodesk is a sponsor, but, you know, I just wanted to bring this also to attention that this is really, we feel now that the when is coming, right? So the market's really moving towards it. It's no longer like Autodesk, but Bentley supports that too with their own platform, you know, and that will bring us really to, you know, even a stronger integration that we can now do cross-vendor dependency, right? For our model checker, all the logic can stay, but we can link it now to two platforms, which will even create a much bigger market and business for us, hopefully, right? So everything's connected now. That's also a figure from Dark. And so I guess we are coming closer to when we will have the real collapse that will penetrate the market very quickly. And I think you at the hackathon will develop a number of really, really good ideas, and maybe one of them will be, you know, one of the new exciting super killer apps that will penetrate the market and really change. And, you know, it's not, yeah, it's always nice to, you know, make money and earn money and sell things, right? But I'm also a professor, and I think this is really important to transform our industry. And yeah, with that, I would like to close my little presentation. Hope it was a little bit interesting, and, you know, I'm around to answer some questions.